YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good evening, it's 6 p.m. You're watching GB News and I'm Darren Grimes standing in for Michelle Dewberry. Coming up on Dewbs & Co in the next hour, is the United Kingdom set to hand over £800 million a year for as long as we want to keep a military base on the Chagos Islands? Plus billions of quid in reparations to Mauritius. We'll be asking whether the taxpayer should fund such an outrageous demand. And is Elon Musk overexerting his influence? The German government has accused the billionaire of trying to meddle in the country's election campaign following his endorsement of the AfD. Bit rich, I tell you that. And we'll also be asking whether the rail unions have this country in a chokehold and take a look at the council staff who have upgraded working from home to working from the beach. Couldn't make it up. Plus, the national curriculum is set to be made more diverse under brand new plans to refresh what's currently taught in schools, such as academia. Does it need a woke overhaul? I don't think so. And my panel tonight, the political consultant Alex Dean and the former Labour advisor Matthew Laza. First of all, though, we're going to get your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Darren, thank you very much and good evening. The top stories. 3 Afghan nationals who were convicted in Belgium over their involvement in a major people smuggling ring have been arrested whilst on the run in the UK. Prosecutors in Belgium say they were part of a gang involved in organising the transport of migrants from Afghanistan through Iran and the Balkans into Western Europe. Authorities say they were also part of a group who committed serious sexual offences, including rape against male migrant minors. The gang members now face being returned to Belgium to serve their sentences, and extradition proceedings have begun. A 4th body has been recovered from the English Channel near Calais after 3 migrants died when they fell from a small boat yesterday. French media reports say the body of the man was found near the beach at Saint-Gat this morning, a few hundred metres away from yesterday's incident. 3 migrants died when they fell into the water as their small boat was setting off for Britain early in the morning. Dozens of others were rescued after they fell from the overcrowded vessel. Border Security and Asylum Minister Dame Angela Eagles said that ruthless criminals were responsible for overloading the boats. So far this year, 77 migrants have died trying to cross the Channel. In other news, a national day of mourning and state funeral will be held on the 9th of January for former US President Jimmy Carter, who's died at the age of 100. King Charles paid tribute, saying, "It was with great sadness that I learned of the death of President Carter. He was a committed public servant and devoted his life to promoting peace and human rights." Joe Biden praised him as a man of principle, faith and humility, whilst Donald Trump said Americans owe him a debt of gratitude. The UK flags above Westminster and Downing Street have been flying at half-mast in respect. Mr. Carter died peacefully at his home in Georgia. Now, South Korea's acting president has ordered an emergency safety inspection of the country's entire airline operations system as investigators work to identify victims and try to find out what caused the deadliest air disaster in the country. The king has paid tribute to the victims of that crash that claimed the lives of 179 people. The Jeju air passenger plane was carrying 181 people when it skidded off a runway at Muan International Airport in South Korea. The The country's national fire agency said 85 women, 84 men and 10 others whose genders weren't immediately identifiable died in that fire at the airport, about 180 miles south of Seoul. Emergency workers pulled 2 people, both crew members, to safety, local health officials saying they remain conscious. A British teenager sentenced to a year in prison in Dubai after a holiday romance with a 17-year-old girl has surrendered himself to authorities to begin his sentence, according to a campaign group. 18-year-old Marcus Fakana was with his family in the UAE when he met that girl, who's also from London and is now 18. He was arrested and charged after the girl's mother found their chats and photos and called the Dubai police. Campaign group detained in Dubai previously said Fakana planned to appeal that sentence, and he'd urged the UK Foreign Secretary, who's the family's MP in Tottenham, to intervene. However, when asked about the case, the Foreign Secretary said people should follow the rules of other countries. Elsewhere, 5 people have reportedly been charged in connection with the death of One Direction star Liam Payne at a hotel in Argentina. The 31-year-old star died in October after falling from the 3rd-floor balcony of a hotel in Buenos Aires. Hotel manager Gilda Martin and hotel employee Esteban Grassi, as well as Roger Norres, who was reportedly a friend of Liam, have been charged with manslaughter. Argentina's National Criminal and Correctional Prosecutor's Office is quoted as saying. Brian Pais and Ezequiel Pereira, who both reportedly worked at the hotel, have been charged with supplying drugs. A judge has reportedly ordered that 2 of the 5 accused should be remanded in custody. Edinburgh's Hogmanay celebrations are cancelled due to high winds and extreme weather, organisers announced hours ahead of celebrations kicking off today. Weather warnings are in place for snow, wind and rain right across much of the UK on New Year's Day. Yellow warnings are in place for Northern Ireland, Northern England and parts of Scotland from tomorrow, before extending across most of the UK on Wednesday. A series of warnings are in force and they'll remain in place in some areas until 6 a.m. on the 2nd of January. The Met Office says there's likely to be travel disruption, with almost all of the country impacted by at least one yellow alert over the 4 days. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez, more in an hour.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. Welcome to Dewbs & Co. with me, Darren Grimes. Joining me until 7, my panel, the political consultant, Alex Dean, and the former Labour advisor, Matthew Larser. Now, as always, this show, my friends, is as much about my opinion and their opinion as it is yours. So get your views in at gbnews.com/your say. Now, as I said at the start there, Britain has reportedly been asked to pay up billions of pounds of taxpayers' cash as part of the deal more like a surrender, to hand back the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. It's been revealed in the Times. Talks have stalled over the 99-year lease of a crucial Anglo-American airbase on the island, which sources have suggested Mauritius demanded £800 million a year for, as well as asking for billions in reparations. A grift, if ever I've seen one. This comes as Sir Keir Starmer is facing calls to abandon his surrender of the islands altogether after the new Mauritian government rejected another proposal deal last week. Now, Matthew, if Nigel Farage is right and the Trump administration say, I don't know what Sir Keir Starmer is doing, I'm going to start calling him Surrender Starmer, then this ain't going to get sealed on the dotted line, is it?
Well, I think it isn't. I think that's probably what the government wants. And so this all stems from the fact that the negotiations have happened and have been going on for several years, principally under the previous Conservative government. It's because the International Court of Justice in 2019 ruled against Britain in a provisional ruling against Britain's the situation with Britain's British sovereignty over the Chagos Islands. So therefore, since then, a succession of ministers and officials are worried that they're going to all end up subject to the International Court of Justice. They're all going to be. Now, this is the panic that is set amongst the official class, as it were. So they all think they need to comply with this. So the Tories thought about doing a deal, got close, didn't do one.
Yeah, Lord Cameron apparently told them to sing for their supper.
Yes, I think Lord Cameron did. James Cleverly having been a bit more.
relaxed about
it, a bit more into doing a deal. Anyway, so the government does the new government does a deal, and now two things have happened. The Mauritian government has changed. The new prime minister, who is demanding yet more cash, and obviously we have President Trump about to reassume office. And I think both of them give the British government a rather elegant out, because I don't think that anything is going to satisfy the Mauritian prime minister in the next few weeks, and I think that Mr. Trump isn't going to sign off on any deal.
Well,
so the British government can look like it's trying to do its best to comply with this court ruling without having to get the chequebook out. So it could be a good out for the government,
But why is Lord Cameron able to say, to hell with a court judgment, I'm going to not hand over £800 million of taxpayer cash, and the Labour government seem to be entertaining?
Well, I think I'm not sure he said no forever. What he did was kick it into the medium-term grass, i.e. after the election. So I think, I think the problem, I mean, Keir Starmer is obviously an international human rights lawyer, so he's more worried about these things than he is about than maybe the Lord Cameron is.
That's a good point, though, Alex, because we've got, and viewers know this more than anyone else, they follow this stuff like you wouldn't believe, the European Convention on Human Rights, the International Court of Justice, so many things are included within the quagmire of these globalist outfits appear to be absolutely kiboshing any hope of common sense.
No offence to Matthew, not least because we arrive at the same conclusion, which is I don't think this giveaway is going to go through. But no, it's not a good point. It wasn't a provisional judgment, it was an advisory judgment. Right? And this is why Labour finds itself in troubled waters on this. Because when David Lammy went to the House of Commons to explain why he was wishing to give away sovereignty over these islands, he said that the authority was going to make a binding decision. It seemed likely that a binding decision would be made against the United Kingdom. Not only had a binding decision not been made against the United Kingdom, no binding decision is possible against the United Kingdom. A fact, I'm afraid, for which David Lammy has yet to apologise for, I think in the most generous term we could find, is misspeaking in the House about that. They are of vital interest to the West in strategic terms, and lest people don't quite understand the clarity of the new administration, the incoming administration's position in this, Donald Trump's Secretary of State designate, Marco Rubio, has said that this deal poses a serious threat to US national security. Now, the thing that's going to let the Labour Party off the hook, because it was foreseeable they were wrong about the judgment, it was foreseeable the Americans were going to hate it. What's going to let them off the hook is that the Mauritians have just overcooked it. Yeah. They've just asked for too much money. And now any government can say, well, look, we were really willing to come to some arrangement. Why on earth you'd give away sovereignty for no reason that when you didn't need to, I don't know. But we're willing to come to some arrangement. Your demands are just so absurd that we're not going to pursue them.
Isn't that normal negotiating procedure where you ask for more than you actually think you'll end up at?
Well, you can overplay your hand. But it can't be regarded as a normal negotiating procedure, because the Labour Party tried, this may feel like ancient history to some of us, but they tried to rush through this deal to help out the last Mauritian government. What a bizarre way to conduct yourself in diplomatic terms. But they just tried to rush the deal through to help the incumbent in politics in Mauritius, because we've got a lot invested in that guy's future, obviously. He promptly lost the election. He had 60 seats, and I think he's now got 2. Right, so he just got absolutely marmalised by the electorate.
Yes.
And the new guy asked for even more. That's not a normal negotiation.
Well, no. One of our viewers, Matthew, says Starmer is more worried about foreign individuals than he is his own people. Shame on him and this useless government.
Sorry, I know I'm going on. Just to make a point, there are individuals who've been treated shoddily here. It's the islanders. Yes. Right? The islanders have been treated shoddily, and it was by the United Kingdom, admittedly under Harold Wilson and the Labour Party. Then they received compensation from the Conservative Party under Margaret Thatcher. But they were treated shoddily a long time ago. But there is no reason to hand over these islands to Mauritius, not least because those self-same islanders are not Mauritian and never have been. And the people protesting most about this deal are the islanders.
And the Chagossians themselves, absolutely. And actually, because effectively what we're doing is swapping one colonial power, in a sense, Britain, for another, in terms of Mauritius, with China standing at their shoulder. So, I mean, I think Alex is absolutely right. You might describe it as off the hook, or you might describe it as an elegant out. But hopefully, it's going to close down the issue, because the government's, because it's simply not going to happen on the basis of either the Mauritians or the US signing it up.
And the next time it comes round, we should take a leaf, and I don't often say this, from the French, because the Tromelin Island, which the Mauritians also claim, the French simply say non. And that's the end of the debate. We should do that.
Well, how do you think that the Gibraltarians and the Falklanders, how should they be feeling, Alex? Because I imagine they're a bit worried that this government are a bit weak when it comes to sovereignty.
It is vastly depressing to see Keir Starmer's keenness to throw away assets and things that are places that are British. Heaven forbid the Falklands or Gibraltar ever went in this direction. The only thing I suppose that must be giving them such confidence is the haphazard and inept way in which the Labour Party's pursued this. But look, if we boil it down now, Mauritius is demanding billions of pounds in reparations and compensation and huge annual payments in a deal we don't have to make, that will cause huge upset with our most important ally, the United States. Standing pat and keeping sovereignty of the islands will cost us nothing and cause no issue with the Americans. Well, which one of those sounds better?
But it will get you shouted at international conferences, which is. I'm not saying that they equal out, but I mean, look, I think that the government made a mistake on this. I think we actually agree in the same place, and I think the government needs to learn the lesson from this, which is not to panic at the sign of trouble and maybe just to step back and think through the medium-term consequences. I mean, as you say, betting on the Mauritian government, which then got absolutely slaughtered in its election, was clearly a mistake. They thought that was going to be the easier way out. The alternative was worse, more expensive. Well, the alternatives happened. It is worse, it is more expensive, and therefore, at least, that gives them this way out.
Well, what do you say, though, Matthew, to those who say, oh, my goodness, at what point do we actually make a stand for Britain instead of pandering to every international quango or acronym around the world?
Look, I mean, I think we should write that we're a member of international structures. I believe in the ECHR, even, which I know is a controversial opinion with many of our viewers. But there are moments when you do the right thing. The classic thing about the ECHR, which is just as an example you can apply to this, which is prisoners' votes. We've been told for years we have to give every prisoner the vote. We just ignore it. Yeah. And so, in this case, we should have just ignored what Alex... I was always called a provisional, but it was just an advisory judgment even, so that's even weaker.
The court has no jurisdiction.
Yeah, so exactly. We need to follow the rules when we need to follow the rules, when it's in our national interest not to, and particularly when, in fact, it's only an advisory judgment.
I should say no binding jurisdiction over this. In any business person or any politician this is why it's not just ineptness from the Labour Party's government, it's something worse than that. Anyone on the receiving end of an advisory judgment like this, or of any judgment from a court, will say, what do I have to do as a result? Yeah. And the government will have received legal advice which says nothing. You actually have to do nothing. They have no powers of compulsion at all. And that should have been very informative for the government.
I mean, that tells us, I think, everything, to be perfectly frank. Alex, thank you very much for that, and Matthew, thank you too. Now, a Foreign Office spokesperson has said this: an amount this high has not been considered at any point in negotiations between the United Kingdom and Mauritius. Well, OK, then. Coming up, is Elon Musk overexerting his influence? The German government has accused the billionaire of trying to meddle in the country's election campaign following his endorsement of the AfD. We'll be debating that right after this break.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Christmas canapé offers partygoers a small treat that staves off hunger and soaks up the fizz. Founder and host of Crazy Sexy Food, Hannah Harley-Young, joins me now with a toothsome selection. Lovely to see you, Hannah.
You too.
Origin of the word canapé?
Yes, French. Sort of from the, of course, from sort of the 1800s. It means sofa. So it's sort of playing on the analogy of someone sitting or lying on a sofa. It is about the garnish, traditionally sitting on a piece of stale bread or pastry. Obviously, it's evolved over the years. I don't have any stale bread for you, don't worry. But the idea is that it's something sort of garnish, something exciting sitting on a vehicle that you can put in your mouth in 1 or 2 bites.
It's obviously post-war. What is it? Is it 60s or 70s? How long have we been eating these things?
I would say around about then. And I think what's interesting, I mean, I always look towards even the 80s, a little bit sort of... later on, where it's where you sort of have that sort of the classic vol au vent, which was, you know, a little bit dry, a little bit tasteless, and I think that's why I've brought a real selection for you to show you how far we've come. Another traditional one, obviously, being your pigs in blankets. I'm going to hold off for a second before I choke. Another thing that I have to say about canapés, there are a few little tips that I must give people super quickly. Make sure they're small. 1 or 2 bites. When you're at a party, you're standing, you've got a glass in one hand, then you need to hold it There. OK, I would have preferred a glass of wine, but, you know, I can't stand these canapés where I have to put the glass down in order to eat the food. I want to do it all at once.
I couldn't agree more. You should never eat more than you can lift.
Exactly.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Dewbs & Co. with me, Darren Grimes, alongside Alex Dean and Matthew Larser, keeping you company until 7 o'clock. Remember to get your views in at gbnews.com/your say. Now, lots of you saying that these international courts and quangos and all these other things actually dictating British policy. We need to tell them to sling their rook. And Grumpy Grandad says the problem with Starmer is when he does things, you don't find out until it's done because he doesn't care about democracy. It means nothing to him. Ultimately, he is the total technocrat, right? This is why he loved the EU so much, because they've got so many of these backroom deals and bureaucrats that it doesn't bear thinking about. Sarah says, exactly, Darren, the UK shouldn't be pushed around by global organisations. And, well, and Pat says, would you not just expect Starmer have gone to Mauritius for his holidays? Well, poor man, he's in desperate need of an holiday. Right. Now, Elon Musk has ruffled the feathers of the German government after they accused the billionaire of meddling in that country's election. Mr. Musk has repeatedly endorsed the AfD party, that's the alternative for Deutschland, as well as writing in an opinion piece that the country was on the brink of economic and cultural collapse. A government spokesperson said this: "It is indeed the case that Elon Musk is trying to influence the federal election, and that freedom of speech covers the greatest nonsense." Right. Well, I mean, I seem to remember the German government arresting people for freedom of speech, so I don't think they're that big into it. But Alex, is Elon Musk overexerting his influence here? Do you worry? Are you awake at night with the terror of billionaires getting involved in European politics?
Now, isn't that interesting, the term you use, billionaires? Because it depends which billionaire it is, whether people get upset or not.
George Soros is fine.
So if it's Bill Gates, plenty, governments will rush out and embrace that person. And indeed, our very own government accepted a whopping donation via the British Virgin Islands, no less, just before the last election, and that's fine, that's no problem. Elon Musk, who as far as I know has yet to donate a single penny to politics in this country or in Germany, has, good God, expressed his opinion about the politics in some other country. Let's just assess for a second what he said. The German government has collapsed. That's why they've had to go to an election. And the two great legacies of Angela Merkel, who's, the half-life on her reputation is eroding very quickly. The two great legacies of Angela Merkel was the destruction of their energy market, because after Fukushima, she abandoned nuclear energy, because you get a lot of tsunami in Germany, right? And the second thing she did was say there is no limit to the number of migrants that can come to Germany without proper documentation. Well, it turns out there was a limit. It was about 1.5 million, and it's led to enormous social unrest in Germany. On those facts, it's entirely within the political mainstream to say your country's in real trouble. The government has collapsed. He couldn't hold together his coalition any longer. And I support this party or that party in the course of it. I don't even have a vote, but I reckon they'd be best. It's just one man's opinion. Why are we getting so agitated about it?
Matthew, the point I made earlier was, well, hang on a minute, I don't remember the Germans ever saying, oh dear, we can't have President Obama and the European Commission telling the British people how they should vote in the EU referendum. But I remember very specifically that President Obama was encouraged to say we'd be at the back of the queue if we dared vote for independence.
So I think that the issue with Musk is he's a wind-up merchant. So he likes to get under the skin of the establishment. Oddly, of course, he's actually got more skin in the game, as it were, in Germany, because he has a massive battery plant just outside Berlin in Brandenburg, and he actually wants to expand it. So he is actually a major German employer, the company that he runs. So I think they need to take a chill pill, the German political establishment. In their defence, there is a particular worry about foreign election interference. I'm sure everybody's glued to what's happening in the Romanian presidential election. What's basically happened in Romania is that the country's in crisis because the presidential election has been struck down by their highest court on the basis that they believe that there was Russian interference, and therefore this is just across the way from Germany. Therefore, this is kind of very much on the radar of German politicians. Now, Musk is not running a bot factory. He's making an op-ed in a newspaper. So I would say, let's look at things. The particular issue in this is he says the AfD are not a right-wing organisation. They are actually classified as such by the German intelligence service, which seems to be what's particularly got people's goats in the German debate. I'm personally for taking a chill pill. I'm just trying to slightly empathise with where they're coming from. In terms of this country, all donations need to be done under the rules. There's a clear set of rules at the moment. If you make a donation under those rules, so be it. I think that people need to be careful because people don't like being told what to think by billionaires after a while. But, that's for people to make their own minds up.
Alex, I listened to a Bloomberg interview with the leader of the AfD, and I listened to it because, obviously, the narrative has been that they're this far-right, horrible organisation. And the leader spoke about energy independence, the fact that they'd closed down their nuclear supply and gone to Russia for their gas instead, and leading them to go colder and poorer, and their energy-intensive industry to suffer massively. So she said that the migration issue, as you've just articulated, was absolutely insane. And she also said that the EU has gone too far in expanding a bureaucratic, unaccountable commission.
Yeah.
Which one of those 3 points is an extremist far-right point?
Well, look, they're going to find themselves rowing back at a rate of knots because the AfD is going to do extremely well in the election. It's really interesting. President-elect Trump, is someone that many people had said very negative things about and then found themselves having to row back on because he won the election again. People are determined not to do that sort of thing when it comes to, say, France, where you'll find that many commentators and politicians are conspicuously polite nowadays about Marine Le Pen, even though they would once have said some really critical things. Now, they're making a mistake here in slagging off the AfD, because I think they're going to do rather well at these elections. But your point about the Bloomberg interview, there's another billionaire, by the way, who people don't mind expressing his views. So about international events, as long as it's about his own pet causes. Your point about the Bloomberg interview reminds me that Merz, the conservative in Germany, said that, great quote, "I cannot recall in the history of Western democracy a comparable case of interference in the election campaign of a friendly country." Hang on. The United States hacked Angela Merkel's phone for 9 years. He doesn't think that's comparable. All EU governments and the United States interfered in our Brexit referendum very significantly. And he's not
the CIA funded whole political parties
the CIA
for 45 years.
Political parties and toppled governments in Latin America.
And in Europe, in Greece.
That just all pales into insignificance compared to Elon Musk writing an op-ed.
Short-term memory loss. That's what it is. All right, thank you very much to my panel there. We'll let the viewers decide at home. Now, still to come, we'll be asking whether the rail unions have this country in a chokehold. And we'll take a look at the council staff who've upgraded working from home to working from the beach. Stay tuned.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office.
As we head towards the New Year's period, it's likely to be unsettled, outbreaks of rain and some strong winds too, with multiple Met Office warnings already in force, so do keep an eye on those if you're travelling around for any festivities. But otherwise, this evening we've got a warm front moving into cold air, so not only bringing outbreaks of rain, but also some snow across parts of Scotland, mainly across hills, but we could also see some flurries to lower levels too. And these outbreaks of rain slowly edging their way into parts of Northern Ireland, through into the Scottish borders. It's going to be quite heavy and persistent at times, so a very wet morning to start New Year's Eve. Elsewhere, it's going to be largely dry, plenty of cloud around though, and perhaps some drizzly spots across hilly areas. And for New Year's Eve itself, likely to be a very unsettled day, particularly across Scotland, where we are expecting those heavy and persistent outbreaks of rain, some quite blustery winds, particularly around exposed coasts too, and also snow, particularly across the north of Scotland and Shetland Island as well. And also a very wet start across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England. Once again, heavy and persistent outbreaks of rain at times. But elsewhere, largely dry, though it is going to be a rather windy day on offer, particularly in northern areas under all that cloud and rain as it slowly edges its way towards the southeast, eventually clearing parts of Scotland, allowing some brighter spells to develop, but still very windy here and still plenty of blustery showers on offer by the afternoon. Once again, there's a chance these could be falling as snow at times too. Now, by the afternoon, outbreaks of rain generally across northern parts of Wales, northern parts of England, the driest of the weather likely across the far south and southeast. And then for New Year's Day itself, once again very unsettled. Further outbreaks of rain, this slowly once again edging its way towards central and southern parts of the UK. Largely dry to the north of this, though plenty of blustery showers moving through, once again falling as snow at times, and it is going to be feeling cold and remaining cold for the end of the week also. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems in the West Midlands to the southwest of Walsall tonight, where the Walsall Road remains closed through Darlaston near the railway bridge. Those investigation works are still taking place following an accident this afternoon, and surrounding routes are looking gridlocked, particularly heading through the Gallagher Shopping Park. The M1 in Bedfordshire is partly blocked southbound from junction 13 to 12 south of Bedford at the scene of an accident involving at least 2 lorries. The M27 in Hampshire is partly blocked both ways, junction 8 to 9 west of Fareham for a police investigation. In Devon, midway between Oakhampton and Exeter, the A30 remains closed westbound in Cheriton Bishop and Widden Down after a car caught fire left a spillage behind. The clean-up operation continues. And London Liverpool Street mainline station is closed for engineering works until the new year. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Darren Grimes, alongside Alex Dean and Matthew Lazar, keeping you company until 7 o'clock. Now, some of your views coming in thick and fast. Dennis says, we are told, this is on the Chagos Islands, we are told that Starmer is/was a brilliant lawyer. If so, surely he would have realised that the instruction from a joke international body could simply be ignored. Is he therefore a totally dud lawyer, or does his enthusiasm for selling his country down the river trump, no pun intended, his own professional expertise? Well, and then Paddy asks, has Matthew Lazar seen the light? Has he realised the game is up? He's got a very different attitude this evening. Are you one of Reform's
I haven't
members?
signed up yet. I haven't signed up yet on the website. Although it's a lot cheaper to join Reform than it's join the Labour Party, which is basically 70-odd quid now.
Are you joking?
No, because it goes out once a year. I notice my bank statement and think, flipping heck.
70
Yeah,
quid?
I mean, if you're a young person or you're on a lower wage, there are reduced rates. But yeah, it may even be 78. I have that figure in my mind, but it's around that.
Good Lord, I'd be asking
I feel
for a
it every year.
rebate at this point, a rebate. All right, get your views in, my friends. gbnews.com/your say is the link that you need. Now, salaries in the rail sector, they've outstripped wages for teachers, doctors and soldiers, as train drivers' pay has more than doubled since 2003. The average pay for train drivers in the UK can be between 53 grand and 87,000 pounds. So I find myself asking, after these inflation-busting pay rises, can you actually possibly argue that there's been an improvement in productivity on our railways? Mass train cancellations saw nearly 370,000 services fully or partially cancelled over the last year. You could fairly suggest, surely, that our railways are anything but productive. And yet the punishments for commuters keep on coming as fares are set to rise by nearly 5% in April. 3 decades after privatisation and a pending renationalisation by Labour, the government keep being outwitted by rail bosses' pay demands. So can and will Labour ever get a grip of the union imbalance within the sector? Right, Alex, do you have any belief or hope that the chokehold over our railways by the unions will ever give up the ghost?
Ever, yes. In the next 4 years, no. I mean, yes,
because of automation.
Well, that not least. I mean, it's the quintessential. I mean, people go bananas as soon as you start to say these are not actually necessary jobs, half of them anymore. People go bananas. But automation has rendered a great deal of this safer and very often not required. If we had people in signal boxes yanking on levers for every time you wanted a train to go past, just because the unions have preserved their position, we would rightly be saying it was both absurd and a ridiculous cost. But that's the kind of thing we're looking at now with these drivers. But this is precisely the least likely time for reform to happen. With a Labour government that is very sympathetic to and still largely subsidised by the unions. They are the least likely governments, perhaps in my political lifetime, to actually do anything about this. In fact, they are the most likely government to just throw more money at the union.
You know, Alex, one argument that I've heard articulated a lot, and I'm sure you have too, is that only Labour could reform the NHS.
Sure.
Is it the case that actually only the Tories can reform the unions?
No, it would be only Nixon can go to China. It would still be only Labour can reform the rail services, and the unions that hold us to ransom in it. But they show no instinct to do so. Let me give you an example. In September, which may feel like ancient history to some people, when they were negotiating with the now disgraced Louise Hay, ASLEF, the rail drivers' union, were proud to say they had secured a compounded pay rise going back several years, backdated years, of 15%. Right? Now, nobody in the private sector is landing a 15% pay rise en masse, let alone for money for old rope. And as you were pointing out, since 2011, train drivers' salaries have risen at twice the rate of soldiers or teachers. And I just think this is madness, to be honest. £135 million got waved through just for for train drivers' increases. And I'm afraid with an average salary of £69,000 under this new package, they are not the public sector group people should be throwing money at.
No, and I'm convinced, Matthew Laza, that they're just trying to stop me from getting to work on that East Coast main
yes, which is already nationalised by the Tories.
I can't tell you I've noticed any differences.
Well, in fact, I mean, the worst performer is Northern, across the north of England, which has been nationalised for some time. I mean, look, I believe in trade unions, and I think trade unions have an important role to play. I'm proudly a trade union member. I think there is an issue on the railways because particularly the drivers have the most direct lever to if they don't show up, your train don't go. So therefore, they have exploited that. The government was wrong not to get some concessions in return for the last deal. One of the problems is that because the railways have been split up into so many companies, and because they've all inherited a selection of practices, some of which date back to before the Second World War, you have a total mess. So basically, the train system is kept going because rail drivers are forced to work on their days off, which is not good for a work-life balance. They do well out of it in terms of extra pay, but it's not ideal in terms of their sort of their sort of quality of life. And so what you actually need to do is go back to first principles. I would say, to the rail drivers, this is the government that isn't hostile to you, but on the other hand, lads, and it is mostly lads, overwhelmingly lads, you can't take the you-know-what, and we need to get some proper new ways of working here, which are better for you and better for the passenger.
They are taking the you-know-what, because before the negotiations in September, they were already the best paid in Europe for doing this job. They are on twice the salary of their equivalents in France. They are on 3 times the equivalent of their counterparts in Spain. This is nuts, and we are allowing ourselves to be held to ransom by people in the end the government should take on.
And I can remember in 2016 a certain Mr. About to be allegedly Sir Sadiq Khan promising in 2016 there would be no more strikes on the tube. On
yeah,
TfL.
how's that worked out?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Now, our next story on a sort of similar theme, I would argue, thousands of council staff have been working from the beach more than 2,000 times since the pandemic, an investigation by the Mail has revealed. Now, this is despite 6 authorities declaring bankruptcy in that time when council bosses were approving requests for staff to work from abroad, including destinations such as South Africa, Thailand and the Caribbean, which obviously proved to be a popular destination. I don't know about you, but I can imagine a council office isn't quite as nice as a beach in the Caribbean. Many have raised concerns over staff working from such destinations, fearing vastly different time zones could actually decrease productivity and actually the effectiveness of communication and timeliness. Meanwhile, the expected rise in council tax bills in April will add an above-inflation increase of more than 100 quid to your average bills. Now, a spokesman for the Local Government Association had this to say on that story. Councils have long experience of managing staff remotely, and it's a matter for individual councils to agree from where staff can work. And a spokesman for the Local Government Department said this. Councils are independent employers and they are responsible for managing their own workforces. Well, I mean, Matthew, I'm sorry, but I ain't buying that, right? We seem to be paying over larger and larger sums in council tax and getting fewer and fewer services for it. Bin collection's been spread out more than goodness only knows what. It feels like Christmas really is every day. And the fact of the matter is, I can't see any uptick in productivity despite the fact that there is more money going into these councils.
Well, look, I think everybody's frustrated up and down the country because all kind of non-essential services, which includes things like, you know, lots of local libraries or other much valued amenities have gone. If you talk to people in local government, that's basically gone because the cost of social care, both adult and child social care, has just rocketed. Yeah. It's a huge debate we need to have. You know, you're talking about spending tens of thousands, indeed in some cases hundreds of thousands a year on individuals. So that's why I think that I can totally understand people's huge frustrations. And you know, this is terrible optics. I don't think that this is what is responsible for the decline in services because it's not big enough. But clearly, you know, I think it's fine for there to be some cases where, you know, if somebody's got a very ill parent in a foreign country, if they're going for a few weeks, you know, while their parents die, that's one thing. But sort of hundreds and hundreds of these and people working there for months and months from the beach seems daft.
But Alex, if you consider as well that nearly 1 in 5 people, it's predicted, will be working for the state by 2030. Yeah. And if the productivity levels aren't going up to match that, then we're all, well, up that creek without a paddle, aren't we?
Well, it's a remarkable coincidence that all these people's sick relatives happen to be in the Caribbean, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, I'm greatly sympathetic for...
A lot of British people do have relatives in the Caribbean.
Sure. I'm really sympathetic for local government and the challenge it faces. I've been a councillor. Mm-hmm. They are starved of cash by Westminster, even as social care, as Matthew rightly says, has grown in cost. But anybody, public sector or private, should think very carefully about saying they want effectively to permanently work from home. Because if you've demonstrated that your job can be done from the Caribbean or Poland or wherever, why shouldn't the work be outsourced there too? Mm. See, UK salaries for UK jobs is one thing. UK salaries for Polish jobs is quite another. And if you've demonstrated that your work doesn't need you in the office, you are begging the question of whether your job needs you.
OK, well, that's a good point. All right, now, my friends, with 2025 just around the corner, today at GB News, we're saying thank you, and we're sending our viewers a very special message.
Thank you, Britain.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thank you for your support.
It's you that make us the People's Channel.
As we reflect on our journey so far, we're filled with immense gratitude.
You mean the world to us. We couldn't have reached this point without you.
As a very special thank you, we are giving you the chance to win one of 50 GB News thank you boxes. They're worth £50 each.
For full terms and conditions, and to enter, just go to gbnews.com/thank you.
Cheers very much, Britain. Now, coming up, the national curriculum is set to be made more diverse under brand new plans to refresh what's currently taught in schools. Is this whackery and wokery ahead of what, maths and English? Does it need this woke overhaul? We'll be debating that after this short break.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries, all sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
There are conditions slowly improving across the far east of the Mediterranean, but the risk of showers across southern parts of Spain over the next 24 hours. Low pressure starting to pull away, but still the risk of some heavy showers for Cyprus, but generally dry across Greece, across into Italy. Sunny spells here, temperatures around average for the time of year, but the risk of some showers across southern Spain, and generally dry as well towards Tenerife there, reaching 20 Celsius. Generally dry for the next few days, best of the sunshine towards eastern parts. See you soon.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
British 10-year-old has beaten Stephen Hawking and Albert Einstein in an IQ test, would you believe? Genius Krish Arora got the maximum score of 162, which puts him in the top 1% globally.
Goodness me. Well, Krish's parents noticed his brilliant potential after learning he could read fluently by the age of 4.
Krish, how does it feel to be a child genius?
I feel really happy and privileged.
Aww. Do you see it as a gift that you have?
Yeah.
Oh, that's just wonderful. Nichelle, what do you make of your child being a genius? When did it become apparent to you that Krish had something different, something special?
I think at the age of 4, he was doing things that were way beyond and above his age.
Yeah.
He could read fluently, and he could spell correctly, and he was doing complex decimal divisions. So we thought that he's on to something. I think there's a spark out here.
Wow. And how are you reading books, Krish? Did you just pick them up from your mum and dad's bookshelf and just start reading to yourself?
We used to go to the library and we got books.
Such a good tip. Such a good tip as parents.
Yeah.
Head to the library, take your kids to the library.
So, Nichelle, can Krish just do it all? Is he just an all-rounder genius? Every subject, every talent, he can do it all?
Absolutely, and he helps out the family as well. He's been teaching me grade 1 piano, and he hopes, and I repeat, he hopes that I'm going to complete it in 12 months' time. And he also helps out Mum, because when Mum is teaching his sister, Mum sometimes says, Krish, go solve that problem and, help your sister out. So, yes, he can do it all.
Krish, you're a superstar.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is GB News, the People's Channel. This is Britain's newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co. with me, Darren Grimes, in for Mighty Michelle alongside Alex Dean and Matthew Larza. Let's have a butcher's at what you've been saying. Janice says, why are households being subject to council tax increases when 25% of what we pay is going towards pensions? Utter rip-off. Time for a revolution. I'm fed up with this country and how it's run, in quotation marks. Anthony says, the money we pay in council tax is in their gold-plated pensions. Christine Darren, I'm fuming how council staff appear to be working from other countries. This is absolutely shocking. And Freddie asks a fair question. If a council worker is working whilst on holiday, they wouldn't call it a holiday, but, yeah, how can they be certain that our data is safe and not being compromised? It's a fair enough question. All right, thank you. Get them sent in. I love reading your comments. Now, there's a reminder here that you can join GB News for the ultimate countdown to 2025. You can join Bev Turner, Patrick Christie's, Ben Leo, Emily Carver, and someone called Darren Grimes, never heard of him. And we'll all be together for a very special show. It's GB News' New Year's Eve Live from 10 p.m. tomorrow night. You won't want to miss it. We'll have some fizz, so goodness only knows what we'll say after that. Right, folks, the national curriculum is set to be made more diverse under brand new plans to refresh what's currently being taught in schools. Yeah, out with academia, in with whackery and wokery. The government have pledged to breathe new life into what they're calling the UK's outdated system. I don't know about you, but I don't see the woke mind virus as an idea of breathing new life. It follows on from earlier in the year when the government dropped plans to stop teachers politicising how they taught the British Empire and slavery. The Department for Education say that aims to create a curriculum that reflects the diversities of our society and help produce young children who appreciate the diversity of Britain. Is this a form of inclusive education, or is this just political indoctrination? Alex, I've got to start with you. I mean, I see this as it isn't education. I see this as propaganda, pure and simple.
Well, I have a personal interest in history, and I've studied it a bit, and I've written quite a lot about it. And if young people are constantly being told about how wrong their own country is, if you don't tell young people that their country has an ability, is a place in which they can take pride, you are disinheriting them from their own homeland. In addition, we're telling people for the first time in a long time since real moral prurience, we're telling people that you're born into sin. This, the sins of the father live with you. This group will forever be victims. That group will forever be privileged.
I agree.
Well, in our best moments, Martin Luther King told us, what matters is not the colour of your skin, but the content of your character. And for the first time in a long time, we're telling the next generation that's wrong. The thing that matters most is the colour of your skin, is your background, the place you're born into. You will never escape from that. You will always be defined by that. If this review was going to provide a more nuanced sense of our past, then that would be one thing. But you and I know it won't.
Oh, no.
It's going to be open season for the grievance entrepreneurs. And I'm afraid everyone is now judged, who came before us, as some kind of bigot. And the only point of history is to understand precisely what kind of bigot they were. So more reform, in inverted commas, that we have in our education system, the worse it gets.
Don't you be jumping ship as well, Alex Dean.
Well, I shall not.
The Teachers' Union has said that it's got 280,000 members, Matthew Larson. It's told people that this review must embed anti-racist and decolonised approaches in the curriculum and advise inclusive curricula that reflect diverse authors, cultures and perspectives. So every great emblem of the English language throughout our history, well, they were all white, or at least most of them were, so to hell with them. Is that what we're saying?
I mean, I hope that's not what they're saying, and I certainly think that's not what this review is ultimately going to produce. I mean, obviously, with any review, everybody can put their two pennyworth in, and clearly lots of organisations like like the unions are doing just that. They're putting forward their perspectives. What we mustn't do is have critical race theory taught in our schools. I think it is perfectly reasonable to look across the curriculum if there are the way that the curriculum is structured. So this doesn't mean not teaching history. It doesn't mean that we're going to have Shakespeare kicked out of our school classrooms. But it does mean that, I mean, apparently there was one example of an maths exam question which involved people going on a ski trip. Now, for a lot of kids, a ski trip is out of their, out of their purview.
Matthew, I don't buy that. The National Association of Head Teachers told the review that it should reflect the diversity of our society. They're not talking about about maths here.
Well, no, the diversity of the society. I mean, absolutely. I mean, look, I grew up as a kid in the 80s and early 90s, and I remember that our school books went from being like absolutely 100%, you know, white, which didn't reflect actually Britain even in the early 80s. And then obviously you saw, you know, the maths problems involved Mr. Patel as well as Mr. Smith by the time I left school, and that's perfectly reasonable because we live in a multicultural society. That doesn't mean that we throw the baby out with the bathwater, and I think it would be wrong if we ended up with what Alex says is the worst-case scenario of effectively telling people that their country is wrong, because I don't think Britain is wrong.
We're going to see an uptick in kids being homeschooled?
We already are, but I think that in part is to do with COVID and people finding out that they could. It will increasingly be the case as people lose faith in the school system, not least, of course, because, and this just demonstrates what an appalling start to her job she's had, Bridget Phillipson has revelled in imposing a mid-academic year tax hike on education, which is going to push a number of kids out of, push them out of private schools, and a percentage of them, I don't know what it'll be, but some of them will just homeschool.
It's so Labour can get their teeth into them, and then they'll come out woker than, I don't know, Benjamin Butterworth.
That's not possible.
All right, Matthew, Larsa and Alex Dean, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Tonight. And thank you very much to you at home. Up next, my friend, Martin Daubney.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head towards the New Year's period, it's likely to be unsettled, outbreaks of rain and some strong winds too, with multiple Met Office warnings already in force, so do keep an eye on those if you're travelling around for any festivities. But otherwise, this evening we've got a warm front moving into cold air, so not only bringing outbreaks of rain, but also some snow across parts of Scotland, mainly across hills, but we could also see some flurries to lower levels too. And these outbreaks of rain slowly edging their way into parts of Northern Ireland, through into the Scottish borders. It's going to be quite heavy and persistent at times, so a very wet morning to start New Year's Eve. Elsewhere, it's going to be largely dry, plenty of cloud around there and perhaps some drizzly spots across hilly areas. And for New Year's Eve itself, likely to be a very unsettled day, particularly across Scotland, where we are expecting those heavy and persistent outbreaks of rain, some quite blustery winds, particularly around exposed coasts too, and also snow, particularly across the north of Scotland and Shetland Island as well. And also a very wet start across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England. Once again, heavy and persistent outbreaks of rain at times, but elsewhere largely dry, though it is going to be a rather windy day on offer, particularly in northern areas under all that cloud and rain as it slowly edges its way towards the southeast, eventually clearing parts of Scotland, allowing some brighter spells to develop, but still very windy here and still plenty of blustery showers on offer by the afternoon. Once again, there's a chance these could be falling as snow at times too. Now, by the afternoon, outbreaks of rain generally across northern parts of Wales, northern parts of England, the driest of the weather likely across the far south and southeast. And then for New Year's Day itself, once again very unsettled. Further outbreaks of rain, this slowly once again edging its way towards central and southern parts of the UK. Largely dry to the north of this, though plenty of blustery showers moving through, once again falling as snow at times, and it is going to be feeling cold and remaining cold for the end of the week also. Bye for now.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Major problems in Worcestershire along the M5 tonight. Now, the northbound exit Slip Road is blocked onto the northbound M42. There's been a collision right at the junction, causing long delays. On the western stretch of the M25, the two inside lanes along that four-lane stretch are closed clockwise, and the M40 at the scene of an accident. In East London, the Blackwall Tunnel has been closed northbound. That's at the scene of a collision, causing long queues back to the Sun and the Sands at the A2. And London Liverpool Street mainline station is closed until New Year. That is for the major engineering